All right, y'all. A friend of mine sent me this video. We're going to watch it. By the way, my name is Chris Basio. I am a co-owner of pieaccounting.com. We are an accounting firm built by entrepreneurs to help other entrepreneurs, small business owners, self-employed individuals reach their financial goals. We actually ask you what your goals are. We want to help you. We want to partner with you. And we want you to grow and reach whatever your financial goals are. It's a lot different than most accounting firms, just from saying that, I think. I don't know. Maybe your experience is different. That's what mine has been for a very long time, so we decided to do something about it. And start pieaccounting.com. You can go to pieaccounting.com to get a free consultation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and check out Ramit, who, by the way, I like Ramit. I read his books, I Will Teach You to Grow Rich, and I think there was another one. But years ago, my initial opinion on the books was they were great books. Enjoyed them, recommended them to a lot of people, and cool to see his YouTube channel.
I don't own my house, and I don't invest in any property. But why? Isn't a house a great...
And let me be biased, guys. I do own real estate. I have several properties. We're close to about $4 million in real estate that we've purchased in the last couple of years. So I'm a little bit biased, but I'm not all that biased because I did not buy this place. This is rented. I have reasons I think it makes sense to rent. Let's see if ours are similar. Most of the time, it's not for financial gain or because renting is cheaper. It's typically not, that's usually not the reason why I would recommend renting. I rent because I want to try downtown for a year. Yeah.
Investment? Isn't buying property a great place to put your money? And surely it's better than throwing your money away on rent, right? Well,
yeah,
when you run the numbers, that's actually often wrong. And I've been saying this for years on my podcast, in my book, even on my Netflix show. You've been lied to about buying property. And in this video, I'm going to break down once and for all the 4 main parts that you need to know so that by the end, you'll have a clear idea of the true cost of buying a house and what you should do. Starting with part 1, the dream you've been sold. What is the American dream? If you're like most people, you picture a single family home with a white picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog. Think about it. That is not an accident. Where did that dream come from? That dream is the result of decades of marketing. Some people might even call it propaganda, including from one of the most corrupt organizations in the world, the National...
Nah, maybe some people who have special interests push that narrative for sure because there is special interest, right? But it came from faith, right? It came from people who have a connection with God and have learned that a happy home is a nuclear home. Like a man and a woman coming together is one of the most beautiful things that people can accomplish and recreate. That's a blessing from God to be able to do that. Not a lot of people can do, not everyone can do that, I should say, and do it successfully. I think it just makes sense. I don't think it's propaganda. It's like, 2.5 kids is 2 to 3 kids is doable for most people. Anything more than that starts to get painful. It starts to get taxing financially, emotionally, mentally, all that good stuff, right? 2.5 kids is probably, after doing some data, probably the sweet spot. Having a dog, man's best friend, great companion for the children and for the home, a protector, makes sense to me. Should a family live in a place like this, in like a skyrise apartment? Should they live in a small an apartment? Or should they live where there's a yard where the kids can play, the dog can play, in a suburban area, typically safer, less traffic, less cars speeding past where your kid might get hit by a car, your dog might get hit by a car, especially if you have that white picket fence? No, I think that just makes sense. And having that American dream is part of why America's done so well for so long. For me, because that's a dying dream because of people spreading, this idea that it sucks to have a nuclear family and everyone being so okay with being independent. Look at what society looks like right now. Look at what the world looks like. Chaos. Sorry to go down that rabbit hole, but I don't think it's propaganda. I think it makes sense to have that American dream. But I will say this. I have 2 kids, wife, and a dog, just like, the picture you see there with a little bit more melanin. And you can see we're in a skyrise, but we've done a home in the suburbs our whole lives. I'm 35 years old now. This is the first year we moved to the downtown area. My kids are older now, 13 and 10 years old. And so we decided, let's try it for a year. And we're absolutely loving it, okay? But I would not have done this with toddlers. Nah,
Association of Realtors. They just had $1 billion+ judgment filed against them, by the way. Let me explain what I mean. Most people in the world do not live in single family homes like we do in America, and yet we believe this is the only measure of success.
I don't get that. I don't get that right there, saying that. Like, we're not measuring, you don't measure America with other countries. America's the only place in the world that has freedom of speech. It has the Constitution. Again, not trying to get all political and stuff, but the poor in America is not the same thing as the poor in 90% of the rest of the world. And even if you go to like the UK, for example, most of the homes don't even have AC. Not that they need it or they don't need it, but while I was in the UK staying in hotels and stuff, I would have really have liked some damn AC during that time. It's not always that good, the weather. It's not always cold out there. And a lot of places are like that. If you've ever been around the world, and I've probably been to a couple dozen different countries, I'm sorry, but we're pretty privileged in America. And so we understand you don't need. Can you survive without a home with a backyard and a white picket fence? Of course. But the standard in America, I think it's safe to say our standards are higher than a lot of places. Not saying that we're better than, I mean, we're just in a country that's doing well for reasons. There's a reason for it. And so if everyone can agree that a nuclear home with 2.5 kids, China for the longest time would only let you have one, right? Safe environment, bedrooms for each of the kids, white picket fence, dog, we can agree that situation is probably going to come out more successful than a situation in a small apartment, no dog. Like, you guys get what I'm saying? Maybe I'm losing y'all, but I also think it's a bad idea to say no other country does this, but we think it's necessary. We don't think it's necessary. It's the American dream. It's not necessary. It's a dream. It's what people want. I think it's good for people to want that.
Certainly their parents. A house would cost roughly 2.5x your annual income. People would put down 20%, and the total monthly payments would be about or less than 30% of your gross income, which includes mortgage, maintenance, insurance, taxes, all of it. Let me give you an example with some real numbers. If you make $50,000 a year, gross income before taxes, that means that your house would cost $125,000. Do you know any houses right now that you'd want to live in for $125,000? And in that same example of $50K a year income, you'd put $25,000 down, and your total monthly payments would be $1,250 per month. Have you ever seen a house like that in your entire lifetime?
Yes, because these are national averages, right? What's the national average right now? Let's see. All right, national average is $400,000. And here's the thing. There's also a reason why most families are no longer one job, right? Households. It used to be back in our parents' days and their parents' days, the woman would stay home and you could live on one income for that reason. Things have changed. Women, for the most part, have, like my wife, she would stay at home for the longest time, and she wanted to be stay at home and she was for a few years, and she started getting like depressed. She wanted more purpose. So she started working. She went back to school, started working again, and I just feel like women these days they want to do more than just be at the home. And for those that do, more power to you. That's one of the hardest jobs in the world. For those that don't, that want to go out and work and have some type of professional career, more power to you too. So in my home, we have a cleaning lady. We do meal planning. My wife still cooks and stuff. She loves doing that for us. But she doesn't do it as often as she used to when she was stay at home. But it's nice to have that second income. And it actually makes it for a happier home, as weird as that may sound. Because my wife is working because she wants to. And I think that society has become this more and more so, much more than when our parents and their parents were raising a family. Which means what? You have more income and you want nicer things. Cars are a lot nicer. We demand more in our cars. The technology, they're driving themselves these days. Everybody and their mother has a Tesla now. So prices are going up, but lifestyle is going up. I don't know about you guys, but imagine I grew up with no cell phones. There were no cell phones around when I was a kid. It was landlines. And then I remember beepers came out. Like, I like living in these times with this technology, and I'm okay with spending $1,200 on a phone versus $40 for a landline phone. You know what I mean? Like, I'm okay with that because our quality of life has improved substantially, right? And with more income, we want nicer homes, quartz countertops. Like, I remember granite used to be the quartz. Now granite is okay. Like, it's not super luxury like it used to be. We demand stainless steel appliances, air fryers, and flooring that didn't even exist, you know, back when my parents were choosing their flooring, right? We want solar panels and specific types of roofs and specific types of drywall and AC. Things have changed, guys. Not just home prices, but society in general. You're right. And I think it's all relative. All right, but let me get off my rant and get back to this.
No, things are different now, and yet we are still operating on these old rules that have been passed down to us without taking...
I do agree with that. You can't operate on the old rules anymore. Things have changed so much. 2.5 times is very, very tough.
Into account how things have changed.
For
And this
most
still
people.
doesn't explain the craziness of people who buy houses for 5 times, 10 times their salary.
10 times is crazy. 5 times, I don't think is that crazy. But again, Ramit, you're forgetting. I thought we were talking about families. Thought we were talking about husband, wife, 2.5 kids, and a dog. Because if that's what we're talking about, this is going to be a higher number. I don't know 2 adults that make $25,000 a year that are buying these homes. You know, you guys get what I'm saying? So
with 3% down. And I'm telling you this because if you buy something you cannot afford, it might seem like you are...
And I know they exist. Let me go back because I know how social media is. I know they exist, but they are the exceptions. They're dummies.
And I'm telling you this because if you buy something you cannot afford, it might seem like you are buying your way into the American dream, but oftentimes it will come around and bite you in the end. Which brings us to part 2.
If they weren't the exception, it would look like 2008 out here.
The myths about owning a home. There are 4 main myths about home ownership, and I want you to know each of them. Myth number 1, prices in real estate always go up. No, they don't. You would think people understand this after the 2008 recession, but there are powerful forces at play to get you to forget about this, such as the National Association of Realtors, your family, even the government, all encouraging you to buy a house. Remember, many things appear to always get more expensive.
Guys, so I'm renting here because I'm only going to live here a year, maybe 2, maybe. There's not enough time horizon to make buying this a good deal, right? And I don't know if I want to, and then here's the thing too, when you buy in buildings like this, it's harder to rent them out. A lot of times they don't want you to rent them, or they have HOA restrictions, I didn't want to deal with that. So a year and then I'll figure it out, right? But it's not true. It's true that it doesn't always go up if we're going to be super literal, right? In the long term, real estate has always gone up. You can't deny that. He said it himself that prices have gone up. Our parents used to be able to buy houses for $125,000. Now the average household or the average home cost is $400,000. Like, over the long term, homes always go up in price. So if you plan on owning the home for a long span of time, what are we talking about here? Of course it goes up. Appreciation, it happens, right? Supply and demand. And notice I didn't say live in the property long term. I said own. Because let's say you live in it for 4 years and then you rent it, right? Now you have a rental property. I've done this with my last property, and it cash flows. Somebody else is paying my mortgage, the debt's coming down, appreciation keeps going up. I have an asset that I can also write off. The depreciation on that property is amazing. It really helps offset some of my income tax.
Expensive. That is the result of inflation. But in real estate, which is opaque, landlords will often discount the number of months you
What did he say?
Opaque. Expensive. That is the result of... Remember, many things appear to always get more expensive. That is the result of inflation. But in real estate, which is opaque, landlords will often discount the number of months you can pay. They'll do rate buy downs. They will do all kinds of things to avoid reducing the price while secretly reducing the price to keep up the myth that buying a house always goes up. Myth.
That is crazy. Ramit, that's crazy, bro. That is crazy. So prices go up because of realtors giving free months, rate buy down, stuff like that. No, it's just supply and demand. It's literally just supply and demand. When demand is low, they have to entice home buyers with giving some types of offers, but they're still buying them at the prices that they're selling for. Like, oh my gosh.
Number 2, the value of a house doubles every 10 years. This isn't always true. And even when the price does,
This isn't always true. Okay, so from 1998 to 2008, obviously that's not true. Obviously that's not true. But then check back in 2018, what happened to home prices? 2019, what happened to home prices? What happened? More than doubled. Like the average, on average, in the long span of time, it absolutely does double every 10 years.
double price, most people forget to factor in phantom costs. Phantom costs are all the costs of a house that most people forget about. They're phantoms. They include things like,
damn, he's doing this too. Come on, Ramit.
Closing costs, taxes, property insurance, maintenance, repairs, even the gas to drive to Home Depot.
You guys don't, as renters, you don't think you pay for this stuff? I'm a landlord. What do you think I'm doing as a landlord? I'm looking at all my expenses, not just the mortgage. I'm looking at all my expenses, the mortgage, the taxes, insurance. I'm looking at repairs and maintenance, usually at another 10% on top for miscellaneous, gas, for example, going to Home Depot. Like, I'm adding all this stuff up, and then I'm seeing what the rents are in the area, and I'm seeing if the rents will cover or if there's margin for cash flow, for a profit. Typically, not only are you paying a mortgage as a renter, you're paying all of this stuff, plus some miscellaneous fees as a buffer. What are we talking about?
Depot that you use and your time, and of course, the cost, the opportunity cost of that down payment and what you could have made if you simply invested it in an.
This is true. So the opportunity cost is there for, because you, first off, especially in a buyer's market, you can negotiate closing costs. So the last property I bought, 0 closing costs. I did have to pay the down payment. I think it was like 3.5 or 4%, 5%. I put a 5% down payment, but my closing costs were covered. So let's just say it's the 5%. On a $400,000 home, that's that's $20,000, okay? Let's make it 25 just in case. $25,000 is your cost, okay? If you're going to live in it long term, just look at it as your security deposit, your first, last, and security deposit is the way I would look at it. Even though it's not exactly that, I get it. But like to move into this place, you need first and last months. That's $12,000, okay? Like I could have bought a $400,000 home with $10,000 extra or $8,000 extra and owned the property. It's all in the math. It's all in the numbers, right? But this is true. The opportunity cost of taking that cash and putting it somewhere else is a thing. You could have put it into the S&P 500, into stocks. But that doesn't mean that the stocks were going to perform better than that property, than that real estate. My real estate has performed very, very well. And for most people, they have too. Like, there's a reason why people investing in real estate is a thing, right?
It's actually quite common that you could sell your house for a higher price than you paid for it and still lose money when you factor in all the phantom costs. Remember, it is not simply the bigger number minus the smaller number pops out profit. That's not how it works. You got to factor in all those phantom costs to get your true profit. Myth number 3.
So he's got a great point about that. Like, also, when you go to, this is why I'll never sell any of my real estate. And if I did, I would do like a 1031 exchange. That way I avoid the taxes, but you're going to pay seller's fees, right? The buyer usually does closing costs and the seller usually has to pay the realtor's fees. And depending if it's a buyer's or a seller's market, you might have to cover some of the closing too, like I mentioned earlier. So it just depends on the timing. I don't ever plan on selling my real estate. Worst case scenario, I'll pull lines of credit or I'll refi whenever the market makes sense.
You can use leverage to increase your money. This is partially true, and homeowners often point to leverage as a key benefit.
Literally on cue. I literally was just talking about leverage, line of credit, refi.
You put $20,000 down for a $100,000 house. If the house climbs to 120K, you effectively doubled your money. That is true. But remember this, leverage works on the way up as well as the way down. If your house declines by 10%, you don't just lose 10% of your equity. In fact, you can be wiped out. So it is important to remember that house prices don't only go up, house values don't only go up, and leverage can work for you or it can.
All right, you guys. This is the house price index for the United States from 1975 to 2023. You can see from 1975, it was the average home was $59,000. Okay, 1980. What did it do? It doubled in 5 years. Oh no, it didn't double in 5 years. What am I talking about? 60,000. So we gotta go to 85. Yeah, in 85, it doubled. Okay, so there's that. And then from 85, it's at 124 to 95. It didn't quite double there, but as you get closer here, it doubles 1999. Okay, or 2000, it doubles. And then it skyrockets from 2000 to 2000. And look at this. Even if this is where 2008 crash happened, even if you would have bought in 95, 10 years later, I'm sorry, in 05, you would have doubled your money. But if you would have bought in 2000, for example, 10 years later, you still would have been up. You still would have appreciated by $100,000. Your closing costs aren't going to be wiped by that. Your profits aren't going to be wiped by a freaking recession. It wouldn't have been wiped long term. And then if you would have bought in 2000, I bought in 2012 at the bottom of the market. And I bought this house where I grew up for $90,000. Today is worth $350,000. Okay, because from 2012, 10 years later to 2022, imagine listening to Ramit in 2012, and then 10 years later, the property goes up to $627,000. Oh my God. So even if you were to pull out a line of credit in 2007, right before the crash, and you would have just held on to the property for 10 years, obviously you can afford the mortgage. If you did a fixed interest loan, a lot of people didn't back then. So you just gotta be smart, right? Don't get greedy. But if you would have just held on to it for 10 years, 2017 comes up, you're profitable now. You're more than profitable. This was just bad timing. He keeps pointing to the exception of the rule, right? He keeps pointing towards a 5-year window where not all the time does it go up. Well, it went up all the time besides 2008. It went up the entire time besides 2008. Of course, you got to be careful. There's a difference between being careful and being smart when you invest in real estate and saying don't do it at all because of 2008.
Work against you. Myth number 4, I can deduct my mortgage interest from my taxes and save a bunch of money. Look, tax savings are great, but most people forget that they are saving money that they ordinarily never would have spent. As they put it, you don't spend $1 to save a dime. In many, many cities, the amount you pay for owning a house is much more than you would pay to rent an equivalent house, especially once you factor in all the phantom costs. And remember those.
Guys, again, I'm a landlord. You are paying these costs if you're renting because I put my properties in escrow. They take the taxes, they take the insurance, and they take the mortgage. And whatever those 3 things are combined, I'm going to charge you as the renter and some for my profit. And as a renter, you also pay sales tax. In some states, you have to pay sales tax for rent, for the rent payment.
The housing propaganda, and understand some of these myths. What do we need to do next? Well, that takes us to part 3. Always run the numbers. Have you heard this phrase?
Facts.
If you rent, you're just throwing your money away, or you're paying your landlord's mortgage. I got a question for you. Would you say the same thing about eating out? Would you say, you're paying the restaurant owner's mortgage when you eat that sushi? No. So why is it that just rolls off our tongue when it comes?
No, but we know we could probably make it for cheaper, right? We could probably make it for cheaper. Or, you know what I mean? Or imagine, some people are like, man, I really eat at Chick-fil-A a lot. I'd really like to own a Chick-fil-A. I can eat it cheap and make money from it. I know that's an extreme example, but some people just eat out because they don't want to worry about the other stuff. That's why we're renting in downtown. I really like the downtown because I don't have to worry about lawns. I don't have to worry about I don't have to drive a lot. You know, everything's kind of walking distance. I'm enjoying that. It's not really a financial move though.
To housing. That's because somebody invented that phrase and now it's in the zeitgeist. And we resent that we might be paying somebody else's mortgage, but we don't resent when we go and buy paper towels and pay someone else's mortgage because we're paying for value. Now, this is really important. I want you to pay close attention, especially when you are talking about high cost of living cities like New York, LA, San Francisco, 3 cities I have lived in. Buying can be way more expensive than renting.
True.
In fact,
Miami.
it might not make financial sense at all. I'll give you an example. When I was living in New York City, I kept a very close eye on real estate. I was renting a nice place and I saw that there was a unit right next door. Same view, same square footage, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and I tracked it. It would have cost me 2.2 times more to own than what I was paying in rent. Let's just say I was paying $3,000 a month in rent. It would have cost me $6,600 a month to own an equivalent property. You know what I did instead? I said, first of all, I like renting. If I have a problem, I just text my landlord. And second, I took the $3,600 extra dollars I would have spent owning and I just invested it in the market. And guess what? I made more money doing that.
That's an exception. That's an exception. Like, where are you finding, like, Tampa's not the cheapest place either. It's not San Francisco, Miami, New York City, but it's not the cheapest place either. My place is $6,000 a month. I'm renting. You know, if I was to go buy this place, it wouldn't be $12,000 a month. You know, like if I was to buy a place like this, it might be $8,000 a month, right? It is more expensive, but it's not gonna be double more expensive. And that's only in this market. And that's only if you're putting a small amount down. If you're putting 20% down, it'd be probably around the same thing. I wouldn't do that. That's not to say you can't find good deals, right? Most real estate investors, most people who are buying and are saying it's a good investment, they're going into it with investors' hat. So they're not buying apples to apples. They're buying ugly ass places that have the potential to be the nice place you rent. So I might be able to rent this place for $6,000. I'm gonna find a terrible place that needs a whole lot of work in the same zip code, buy it for, let's say it'll be worth $1 million when I'm done with it. I'll try to buy for 500, put 200,000 into it, and then rent it out, right? That's the difference, okay? If you're buying real estate with investor's hat, you'll be fine, even if you plan on moving into it. So like the last property that we bought that we moved in, I bought the house for $500,000. It needed a lot of work. We put $100,000 into the property. We're in it for $600,000. Today it's worth $850. I can rent it out and make a profit. My mortgage is $3,500 on that property. I can rent it out for $5,000 a month, okay? But we renovated it, lived in it for 2 years, and then we moved out. Had a pool, nice yard, parks, beautiful place to raise a family. No, we were there for 3 years. Beautiful place to raise our kids. And before that, we were in a smaller house, but same thing, yard, pool, all that stuff. So we did the suburbs to raise our kids up to the age that they're in now, 10 and 13. And it was a very smart investment because we went into it thinking long term. I hope that makes sense.
Renting and investing the difference than I would have owning. No Home Depot trips, no renovations, no problems with the faucet, just living my life, texting my landlord, sitting back on the weekends and chilling.
That ain't how it works.
And investing
And that's not how it works, man. If you're here, that's how it works. And that's how it works even if you buy a spot like that. Why? Because you don't got no lawns, you don't got, they literally have maintenance in the building. Call concierge on the bottom floor, maintenance is up, right? They're full-time working in the building. Same thing with apartments. But a home, if you're renting a home, you still got to mow the lawn. You still got to take care of the pool. You still got to take care of the place. You can't let it fall apart. You won't get your security deposit back. Still got to pressure wash the driveway, especially if you're in a HOA, if you're renting in an HOA community, because the HOA is going to be on your ass. All these things still occur when you're renting a home with a white picket fence. When you're a family with 2.5 kids, a dog, and you want a home with a white picket fence, renting it, you still have those responsibilities. I don't understand where he's getting that from.
$3,600 per month in the market. Look, I'm not saying your financial situation will be exactly the same, but if you buy a house without opening up a spreadsheet and entering some numbers, you are making a huge mistake. I want you to run the numbers. I want you to.
And again, if you're living in a place like this, it doesn't matter if you buy or rent. The lifestyle he's talking about, I'm loving it. I don't have to worry about my lawn, my pool, none of that stuff, right? But if you're renting or buying a home, doesn't matter if you're renting or buying a house, a single family house, you have to do all that stuff. And if you don't, it's because the landlord takes care of it, right? They got the pool service, they got the lawn service, because they don't trust you to do it. And it's already put into the price. You're paying for it anyways.
Look at the home you're thinking of buying.
Like, think about it. Landlords are not going to be like, you know what, just to take care of the place, I'll pay for it. Don't worry about it. No, they include the damn cost in the rent.
And calculate the true cost. That includes property taxes, which will go up, maintenance costs, which are...
And guess what goes up too? Every year, rent. Why? Because property taxes go up. Because insurance goes up. So rent goes up.
Are unpredictable, but still need to be factored in. Even the $25,000 roof repair that's going to happen 11 years from now. You need to properly account for that now. Mortgage payments, opportunity cost. Use this to work out the real monthly payment of owning a house. And then compare that number to the cost of renting a similar property. If owning is considerably more, then financially speaking, it might make sense to rent and invest the difference. On the other hand, you might discover that it makes great financial sense to own. If that's the case, God bless. But I want you to understand these numbers before you make the biggest purchase of your life. Now, what about property as an investment vehicle? What about buying a property and renting it out? Well, I will say that it can work, but you've got to really know your numbers. And in my experience, most landlords do not even know their own basic numbers, much less are they able to properly plan and set aside money and treat owning a property as a business. In fact, in my experience, over half of the people who write to me in financial trouble are there because of one of two things: their housing costs or how much they spend on their cars. So buying a house should be thought of as a purchase first, a very expensive purchase, and an investment second. Why? Why do you need to think about your house as a purchase, not an investment? Let me tell you, there are two reasons. First, the problem of risk. If your house is your biggest investment, then how diversified is your portfolio? Think about it. If you're paying $2,000 a month to a mortgage, are you investing $6,000 a month?
Okay, your rent's $3,000. You were smart with how you purchased your property, so your property's $3,000. Actually, your rent's $3,500. The property you bought because you were smart was $3,000. You put some work into it, all that good stuff, but you still gotta spend money living somewhere. Where all this extra money is to invest because you're renting, it only exists if you purchase something bad, if you make a bad purchase, or if you're in a market where it doesn't make sense to purchase. Okay, but in any market, if you know your numbers, if you become a good investor, like Ramit was saying, you can find properties that are worth investing in. They're still investing in Cali. They're still investing in New York City. They're still investing in Miami. You just got to get informed. If you don't want to get informed, don't do it. It's much easier, like Ramit is saying, it's much easier. No research, no studying, no sweat equity, no working, no risk, to just get a 9-to-5, rent, put your money in the S&P 500. That's it. Just do that your whole life. You're never going to be wealthy doing that, but doesn't mean you can't have a fulfilling life and a life you enjoy. There's nothing wrong with that either. And I probably shouldn't say you'll never be wealthy doing that. I mean, there's plenty of people who become wealthy doing that. I'm sorry, that was stupid. As long as you have a high income, you'll be fine, you know. But you gotta have a high income, right? In order to get wealthy that way, you're gonna have to have a high income. People say, no, you don't. You can become a millionaire doing that. Janitors have done it. They did it over the course of 40 years. By the time they're rich, they're 75 years old. I don't call that exactly wealthy, because you don't have your health anymore. You don't have time anymore. I think wealth is more than just monetary. So assuming from the chart that I showed you guys, right? You guys heard what he said. I wasn't showing the screen, I don't think, because I'm stupid. But looking at this chart, okay, this is from 1975. It's not 1915, but from 1975 on, okay, we went from 60,000 to $657,000, guys. Imagine listening to this guy's advice in 1950 or 1965, right? You'd be pissed. But this also assumes that price appreciation is the only way you make money from real estate. No, you make money from appreciation, from inflation because the value of money goes down, right? Which means the debt is worth less if you're buying the property with debt. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. The cash flow, let's say you lived in it for 3-4 years like I usually do, and then you rent it out the rest of the time. So it should be cash flowing. So you're gonna get monthly income from it. The tax savings, especially once it becomes an investment property, you're gonna save a bunch in taxes. You're missing out a whole bunch of different ways that real estate makes money besides just appreciation.
Compound over time. If at some point you want to add in property as an investment, sure, part of a well-diversified portfolio. If you want to own your house to live in, treat it as a purchase, not as an investment. Okay, we've got one part.
So I can agree with that, but I like an extra step. Buy the real estate that cash flows. Start or buy businesses that cash flow. Like I had a job. I was a barber for the longest time. But as I was a barber, I was taking that money, obviously paying for our lifestyle, paying for our bills, for our needs. And then what was left over, I was investing in real estate, in barber shops, in businesses. And then I was taking the profits from those items and putting it into the stock market, putting it into index funds, into crypto. What's wrong with doing that? Now you have multiple sources of income that you can invest and speed up the process so you don't have to wait 30, 40 years to become wealthy, financially wealthy, right?
Left. But before we jump into that, if you're watching this right now and you've made it this far, hit subscribe because we've got tons of new videos coming, chock full of new ways of looking at money. Which brings us to part 4. Is buying a house ever a good idea? I want to make sure nobody misunderstands.
I like this.
Because a lot of people have accused me of saying you should never buy a house. That's not true. In fact, I will buy a house myself one day. And as I said, it's going to be a terrible financial decision.
You're going to buy it cash.
But I'm going to do it anyway. What I am against is poor financial decisions and simply following what everyone else is doing without ever running the numbers. So how
Why is
am
it
I
going to be a
planning
terrible
ahead
financial decision
to buy a house? Well, here are 5 questions I'm asking myself, and I recommend you do the same. Question number 1, will I live here for 10 plus years?
Will you own it for 10 years? You don't have to live in it for 10 years. Will you own it for 10 years? And I don't sell real estate. I'm not ever selling it. And it'll be managed by property management. I don't have to deal with it.
Because when it comes to all the costs that you will incur, including those transaction costs and closing costs, you want to amortize or spread them out over 10 years. It's kind of like buying a new car. The minute you drive it off the lot, it loses a pretty sizable percentage. That's the same thing with a house. But nobody talks about it. The minute you buy a house, you lose tens of thousands of dollars. So you want to spread those costs out over at least 10 years. That way, you have a very good shot at coming out with a good financial outcome.
What happens to all the rent money that you spent in 10 years?
Question number 2, will my total monthly housing costs be less than 28% of my gross income? Let me explain. This is really important to know. Why gross income? Because some people take out tons of money to max out their 401k. We want to start from apples to apples gross income. Why 28%? Well, typically that was considered a good amount to manage risk. It's really hard to stay below that number. So maybe in a high cost of living city with low amount of debt, you can stretch it 32, 33%. But you want to be very careful because the higher you go, the more risk you have and the less you will be able to have any money to do anything else. Question number 3, have I saved 20% for a down payment? I'm not saying you have to put 20% down, but saving 20% down is a signal to yourself that you can actually save money consistently. And that is something you will have to do once you own a house. Question number 4, am I okay if the value of my house goes down? Well, you should be okay because house prices go up and house prices go down. House prices go up and you might actually still lose money once you factor in all those costs. So you should not buy a house if you are thinking it's going to be a magic way to get rich, because for many people it's not. But if you're buying a house saying, look, I've calculated the numbers, I'm okay if it goes up or down, I'm buying this as a house, a place to live, that's a good sign that you might be ready. Question number 5, am I excited about buying? Do you know how many people I speak to who just feel so beaten down because everybody around them has told them, you should buy a house. You're a failure until you buy a house. Oh my God, you're throwing money away on rent. You should buy. Just feel excited.
You might as well just rent. With these 5 reasons to buy a house, just rent. These 5 reasons solidify his argument even more why you should rent. Like,
About buying.
I thought you was really gonna convince me, gonna have like a convincing reason people should buy houses, but like, are you excited to buy a house? Why would they be excited? What's the difference between buying and renting a house? You got a house, right? Oh, you can make it your own, you can spend more money on it. Okay, just want to do it. You could just want to do certain things for renting a home. I had a friend of mine that almost installed a damn water heater in a spa for the pool that in a home that he was renting because he just wanted to. You can do the same thing when you're renting. I don't know. I don't get this.
Do you know how many people I speak to who just feel so beaten down because everybody around them has told them, you should buy a house. You're a failure until you buy a house. Oh my God, you're throwing money away on rent. And they genuinely feel like failures. You are not a failure if you rent. I could go out and buy a house today, and I choose not to. I want you to be
I like that
empowered
message. That's real.
to run the numbers and make a decision for your rich life. Forget what your parents say. Forget what your friends say. You decide what is right for your rich life. Now, if the answer to any of those questions is a hard no, then it's probably not the right time to buy. Now, I hope this video saves you money and helps you create your rich life.
That was a good point at the end, man, because I did have a sense of urgency to buy a home when I was younger. It was a prideful thing. It was definitely something that I just wanted to accomplish. But I think there's definitely a thing to say to continue. Like, I could have just kept renting and invested my money in businesses and the S&P 500 and still been successful, right? But there's also, if that's a goal of yours, doesn't matter how you came up with that goal. There's something to say about accomplishing it, whether it's smart financially or not. And what that did for me, how old were we, babe, when we bought our first house? Like, young, right? 23 or something like that? Yeah, like 23 years old. And it made me believe in myself. It made me feel like, damn, finally something to show for all this hard work. Number one, number two. And then number three, it gave me the experience to understand foundation cracks, property appraisals, inspections, going to the closing table, negotiating, fixing things, seeing how much it would cost to renovate certain things. Those little details helped me when we would go to do build outs for our businesses, for our rental properties, for barbershops. So I think it's very valuable, and I think everyone should experience purchasing a home earlier rather than later. So agree with some of what Ramit was saying. Obviously not all of it. I got a lot of grays coming in, boy. I'm getting old. Look at that. Look at that gray right there in my mustache. It's crazy. That's wisdom, boys.
I love it.
All right, y'all. That's it for this video. Shout out to Spence for sharing this with me. That's my thoughts on renting a home. I do think there's a spot pace for renting a home if you're not gonna live in it own it. If you're not gonna own it long term, and just because you want to,